All right, so welcome again, everyone. Today we have this fantastic professional development opportunity. We'll be getting some tips from Dr. Sarah Hemler on how to craft your best presentation, whether it's poster or oral. You can use these tips as you start to put together your presentations for the upcoming meeting in Madison, or you can use them for future presentations, of course. So I will hand it over to Dr. Kurt Buschorner, who is co-hosting, and he'll tell us a little bit more about the event before Sarah gets started.
Awesome, thanks so much. And I'll invite people, if you want to turn on your videos. I know sometimes as a presenter, it's a little strange to present to a whole bunch of dark screens. It can kind of feel like recording a webinar or something like that. So no pressure, but if you are interested in turning on your screen, we would welcome it. And then so first I want to introduce, so we're offering this as part of a NSF grant. This is new to ASB. This is the first year we've done it. And I wanted to mention it for a couple of reasons. One is this is the first of 3 events. So in about a couple weeks, the week before the conference, we're going to have another event, a panel on sort of how to best attend the ASB meeting. So I hope you'll attend that. And I think that there's a wait list, but maybe some of you are registered. The 3rd event is a how the networking workshop on the first day of the conference. So I look forward to seeing you all at those 2 events. The other reason I wanted to say it is that we're going to have a survey, and so for evaluating our program and going back to NSF and telling them how this grant did, that data is super important. So I hope that you will consider taking the survey. So I've known Sarah Hemler for a lot of years, and one of the things that that I love most about Sarah is that she really cares about presenting, and she's never been afraid to experiment with different ideas and to try things. And so through that process, she's gotten really good. We were at a conference in Japan last month, and it was a conference that I was nervous presenting at, and I've been doing this a lot of years. And in the first minute, Sarah was also presenting at this conference. She steps out from the podium and is sort of is working the stage, and it just if I wasn't sitting, I would have taken a step back. So I'm really excited that she gets to share some of her tricks with you all. So I don't want to take up any more time than that. I'm just happy you all are here, and if you see me in Madison, introduce yourself. I'd love to meet you.
Great. Hello, everyone. The infamous going to share my screen now. All right. Oh, where are we? All right. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm really excited to present this today. And I could start off with a title slide like this. It's efficient, it's clear, you know exactly what I'm going to be doing. But I think it's a lot more fun to perhaps introduce a title slide like this. So I'm breathing life into your presentation and poster. How do you do that? How do you engage your audience with tact? And before I introduce who I am, we're going to put up a little poll, and I would love to know who you guys are. Anna's going to put that up, and I would love to know if you have never presented a poster or an oral presentation, maybe 1 to 3 times, maybe 3 or more times. And also, if you would like, I think it's cool that we're coming from all different places. So if you want to put just your name and maybe where the state from where you're watching, or the country if you're out of the US, and we can kind of just all get to know each other a little bit. All right. I have about 5 more seconds to answer. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll. And if we can show those responses. Awesome, so we have a really good mix. Most people have presented 1 to 3 times for the poster and the oral. Okay, so my goal for this is that you will, regardless of how you responded there, that you can get maybe 1 or 2 or more tips from this. Okay, all right, let's go for it. So who am I? My name is Sarah Hemler. I'm an engineer and biomechanist. I am from Maryland, and I did my undergrad at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County in mechanical engineering and biology. And then I hopped on over to University of Pittsburgh, where I completed my PhD in bioengineering. And the work there was focused on occupational slips and falls. So I did a lot with shoes. So some of the examples you'll see today are related to biomechanics and shoes. And then after my PhD, I came over to Geneva, Switzerland, where I am now. And this is home for me now. And I'm in a postdoc right now. All right, let's get started. So here's a quick outline of what we're going to go over today. Why do we present our research, and maybe giving a different perspective when you're preparing your research of how you can look at it. And then we'll spend about 30 minutes on oral presentations, and then we'll take some questions, and then we'll go to poster presentations. If, for example, you only want to come to poster presentations, which I'm a little biased, I think you can gain something from everything. You can come back at 2 p.m. Eastern time. That's exactly when we'll start on the poster presentations. All right, so in order to introduce presenting approaches, I'm going to show a little video, and I would love for you to try to follow along as best as you can. Ready?
Simply squeeze your hand, squeeze it tight. Do you feel the poker chip in your hand? Would you be surprised if I could take it out of your hand? Say yes. Good. Open your hand. Thank you very much. I'll cheat if you give me a chance. Make it harder for me. Just use your hand. Grab my wrist, but squeeze firm. Did you see it go? No, it's not here. Open your hand. See, while we're focused on the hand, it's sitting on your shoulder right now. Go ahead and take it off. Yeah, let's try that again. Hold your hand out flat. Open it up all the way. Put your hand up a little bit higher, but watch it close there, Joe. See, if I did it slowly, it'd be back on your shoulder.
All right. Did anyone get every single step of that? You did raise your hand. Anyone? All right. So this can be your research sometimes. Your research is a magic trick. You know exactly how you did it, but unless you explain it, no one else can really follow it and maybe repeat it. So the goal of your presentation is to explain the magic trick. And you want to do this slowly and clearly, but not too slow or elementary. And to quote a beloved scientist, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to replay the video at half speed, and I'm going to explain how he's doing it as an attempt to show you how we might explain our research.
Surprised if I could take it out of your
All right,
hand.
so right
Say
now
yes.
he's warming up to the audience. He's touching him on the shoulder to habituate him to the
Thank you
touch,
very much.
okay?
I'll cheat if
Touching
you
him
give me a
again.
chance. Make it harder for me. Just
All right,
use
he's
your
warming
hand.
everyone up.
Grab my
He's
wrist
switching
and
the poker chip to his right hand. It's now on his
squeeze
shoulder.
firm. Did you see it go?
Good sleight of hand.
No, it's not here. Open your hand.
He's focusing his
See,
attention
while
on the
we're
hand.
focused on the hand, it's sitting on your
Now he's
shoulder
reaching
right
into his
now.
right pocket to get the second poker chip right now,
Go ahead and take it
while the
out.
audience is focusing on something
Yeah,
else.
let's try that
Touching him
again.
on the back to re-habituate him
Hold
to
your hand
touch.
out flat, open up all the way. Put your hand up
Now
a
he's putting the
little bit
second poker
higher,
chip on
but
his shoulder,
watch it closer,
using
Joe.
sleight of hand to
See,
keep
if
it
I
in his
did
left
slowly,
hand.
it'd be back on your shoulder.
And voila, we have the magic trick. All right, you guys get it that time? All right, so that's the goal of your research. You want to show off the cool magic that you've done and explain how. Other reasons are for network and obtaining funding. It's great for professional development. And do superheroes really exist if no one sees them? And a fifth, and perhaps my favorite reason of why we're presenting, has to do with our mentality towards presenting. So what you might go into a presentation thinking is, oh, I hope I do a good job. But I want to propose that I think there's a different way and a better way to think about it. And it relieves the nerves, and it helps to give a different perspective as well. What if you asked, how do I serve the audience? Because the truth is, every single one of you have something to give, and you have something that you've been working on that no one else knows about, and you have a different perspective on your research. And so you presenting at a conference is a way for you to serve the audience with new information, with different techniques, with lots of different things. Okay, so during this this session, we are going to pass out a worksheet. So I believe it's already in the chat. And if you go ahead and open that up, there's some different ways, and we're just going to take a few seconds. And one of the first questions is, how can your presentation serve the audience? So I want you to think, maybe you're presenting at ASB or in a future presentation, and what are some ways that you can serve the audience? For example, at this conference in the picture, I was presenting on wear mechanics as they relate to shoes. And so I needed to explain more circle to the audience, and in order for my research to make sense, but it was also a way for me to serve them perhaps with some newer information and a new way to look at things. And so when you're asking yourself, how do I serve the audience? It gets the focus off of you and thinks more of a generous perspective. Okay, so if you want to fill out that worksheet, you can do that now. And all throughout the presentation, there are questions that as you follow along, you can fill out some practical ways that it can affect your presentation. All right, so let's go ahead and jump off this cliff and get at it. Okay, so let's go to the oral presentations. This is a slight or just a brief outline of what I'll be talking about today. So we have slide design, how to explain your science, how do you frame the takeaways, some additional tips, the final slides, and the questions. But before I get into that, I want you to think, at which point in my first few minutes of the presentation did you decide whether to completely zone out, or you're like, all right, I'm gonna pay attention to this. Okay. It's often shown that in the first 7 seconds of your talk, someone is making a judgment and they're thinking, all right, should I pay attention? Should I not? And then in the first 2 minutes of your presentation, the audience is subconsciously deciding whether or not they're going to listen for the whole thing. Okay, so I hope you made the decision to listen and to really engage in this. But when you're preparing your talk, I want you to think about, all right, what can I say at the very beginning of a talk? In the first 7 seconds, how can I have maybe a particular script to draw in the audience? And in the first 2 minutes, how can I do something that is going to help to draw them in? When I was creating this presentation, I not only thought about the content that was going in, but I thought about the order and where I was going to put different pieces into the presentation in order to make sure that it's interesting and not just a monologue. So I have an interactive piece at the beginning. You were thinking about the magic trick and all of that. I have graphics and visual draws throughout the presentation. And then there's a few mental wake-ups. So if people are starting to drift off, it brings them back in. All right, so let's get started with slide design and formatting. First thing is structured talk. So I started off with an outline, and research has shown that structured presentations are easier to retain than freeform. So it's often good to give a brief outline. And for many presentations for research, this is the typical introduction. Why is the research important? Then the methods, and then your results, and then your discussion, and then some takeaways. So you're listing out all of these, you're going to go through all of them, and then you want to recap at the end to have your main points. Some people have said that the audience will only retain 10% of what you say. So one way to help to increase that is to recap at the end, but you can also go back and say, this is important to grab people's attention. Next, please use contrasting colors. You can notice that the word contrasting is very hard to read. So I often like to use a white background with colors on it, but depending on your research, maybe it's better for a dark background. Let's say if you work in fluorescence and all of your images work better with the dark background, you can do that. Also sometimes depending on where you're presenting, a certain slide background can be better, but either way, it should always be a dark background with light text, or the opposite way around. And thinking of people who are colorblind, you can also avoid putting red and green together, and you can also look up some other combinations that might be difficult for those people to see. Next, using a big enough font. I often say 24 or greater, or 24 or less is not preferred. So the line that says 24 is 24 size font. 28 to 32 is great for text, and 36 to 44 for titles. And you might be saying, but Sarah, if I put it really large, I can't put as much on a slide. And I would like to counter that and say, well, maybe you can make 2 slides, or maybe you can change the way that you're presenting the slide. Next, keep it simple and strategic. All right, so with this, animations. Maybe we've all seen a presentation where someone uses animations like this, and it's not directly linked to the strategy or the goal of the research. One of the things that I like to do with animations is I have, let's say, a lot of things on the slide, but I only bring things in. I use the appear function. I only bring things in as I'm talking about it. And it requires that you know your presentation really well, but it also makes for a PowerPoint that's much easier to follow. So as you can see on this slide, there's already a lot of information, but I'm showing you step by step what I'm presenting, so your eye is drawn to a particular line. Templates. Sometimes the university or the lab has templates that you use. Sometimes the organization asks you for a certain template, so you can use that. And then wording, fonts, and styles. I tend towards a sans serif font. It's just a lot easier to read when you have Times New Roman or something like that. It's a little bit harder on the eyes for a presentation. All right, just a few more for the slide design. Use images instead of text as much as possible. I really like the site Unsplash because it has high resolution images that are free, but there are a lot of other ones out there as well. And I'll talk a little bit about how to use images. And then using slide numbers is really important, because mainly for the questions. So if someone asks you a question and they say, hey, can you go back to this slide number? I had a question about this. It's just really useful for that. Citations. Having in-text citations or citations on the slide is better than having them all at the end, because if someone has a question about what you're doing in the moment, they can just see the reference and then they can look it up during the talk. And if you have a lot of citations on or references on a particular slide, you can number them and organize them as such. And then lastly, try not to have more than 3 to 5 lines or topics of text per slide, as people can sometimes be lost. All right, so that is it for formatting. And now we're going to go on to explaining the science. How do we take this magic trick and make it understandable? One of the things that I'll start with is a tool in PowerPoint called icons. So this is a very easy to use tool. It should just be in the taskbar of your PowerPoint, and you can type in a certain word such as walking, and it'll give you some different icons that you can use. One way I like to use these is to have a reoccurring image come up for the audience. So for example, if you're doing a running protocol, you can use this icon, and anytime you're talking about that running protocol, you bring up this icon. So the audience saying, all right, they talk about this before, it's the same thing. For a blood test, you can use a syringe. For mechanical tests, maybe some gears. So that's one way. This is an example of how to take text. So let's say I have a bulleted item or 3 items in a list, and I want to show that they're all part of something. Instead of just listing them as text, I could make it into a Venn diagram and show that all of these 3 things are connected, and with different interactions, we have some different things. But when all of them come together, we have, for example, sustainable innovation. All right, this next slide, I want you to think about what you see on it that is not desirable, and perhaps how you could, I guess just what are some things that you see on it that are maybe not well done? I'll give you a few seconds. All right, so first I'm going to talk about the background. Yes, this may be the building where you did the research, and it's such, you spend a lot of your life there, but it has nothing to do with the research per se. So you can just take that out and use a plain background. Also, there's not enough contrast between the words and the background. And these particular words are a process, and it's just a bulleted list. So instead of using just a bulleted list without any images or anything, I want to propose a different way to look at it. So for example, you have an image processing, and I won't go through the actual research, but you could say, all right, we started with this, and then these are the different steps that we took, and you talk through each of the steps, and you progressively use the animations to show each of the steps, and you use minimal words, and you explain it as you go to explain this different process. Okay, this next slide is one that I used in a presentation. I don't think it's the worst I've ever done, but as Kurt said, I just experimented with a lot of things. So I'm going to present this slide and then maybe a better way to grab people's attention at the beginning. So I started off with, did you know in Portland it's illegal to walk down a street with your shoelaces untied? Did you also know that every year there are this many injuries? And so I started off with that to draw the attention of people. Now, after having a little more experience, I would say that another way to draw people's attention is to involve them somehow. So for example, if I'm talking about shoes, I can say, look at the bottom of your shoes. On a scale from 1 to 10, how likely might you be to slip? And this engages the audience to think about, all right, how does this involve me? Might I learn something in all of this? So in your research, right now, I want you to think about what is a way that I could maybe involve people in the research or get them thinking about it. Some topics are harder than others, but brainstorm with some people around you to see how can I make this interesting for the audience. All right. Another thing for explaining the science, there's a lot of different ways that we can explain research. And one of the things we're going to send out in the next week after this presentation is some supplementary resources. And this chart will be among those. And what this chart is basically saying is, all right, if I have comparisons or relationships I want to relate, what is the best way in chart form to share this information? I tend to stick with scatter charts. Column charts and line charts are go-tos because it's very easy to interpret. So again, we will share this with you. All right, there are lots of different ways that you can explain research. One could be with the column chart, and yeah, you can get some information out of this, or you can maybe test your creativity a little bit and share some different graphical ways to show let's say the prevalence of slips, trips, and falls compared to some other injuries. And again, the more you try these kind of things, making some different graphics in PowerPoint, the better you'll get. So try in safe environments and just keep retrying and they'll get better. All right, let's talk about explaining the graphs. All right, so I'm sure, or maybe you've been in a presentation where someone just puts a plot on the screen and doesn't explain it at all. And they say, all right, we saw that there was a relationship between these two. And then they move on to the next one. All right, so I'm gonna give an example of, this is my research. You don't have to understand the research, but I'm gonna orient you to the graph to know how you might explain the research in a way that gives the audience enough time to look at the graph and orient themselves and understand what you're doing, okay? So again, you don't have to understand the research, but just to give an example. So here on the y-axis, we have the wear rate, and then on the x-axis, we have the peak required coefficient of friction, and each of the markers is a different shoe type as shown on the right. And as you can see, as the peak required coefficient of friction increases, the wear rate also increases. And from that, we saw that there was a significant relationship for the peak required coefficient of friction, but not for the shoe type. So from that, you have a little bit of time to understand, all right, what are the different axes and what do the markers mean? All right, and one last explaining the research or explaining the science plot. This next slide is an example of how you can take something that's really research focused and you can tie it into everyday life to make it a little more explainable to people. So for example, on this slide, I have the main outcome on the top, and then I have one of the main findings, but in this picture, I'm saying, all right, it was a particular size here, but it relates to everyday life. That size is the same as the end of the battery, or maybe if you like chocolate, same as an M&M. And we have this plot that it relates to. And then we also had other outcomes, and this size was the same as a quarter, or if you like larger chocolate, a Lindor chocolate, and that relates to this. So we're using the animations to progressively show the different things on the screen, and we're also using everyday objects like batteries, my favorite, chocolate, or other things to make it related to people. Okay, so we're going to take a pause. I want you to look at the worksheet again, and we have some different questions on there. And we're going to look at the question of what aspects of slide design or formatting are you inspired to revisit for your presentation? So take 20 seconds, just write down real quick, maybe something that you took from that you can use in a presentation, or how you might think about it differently. All right, so just take a few seconds. Maybe an idea that was spurred.
Sarah, do you think we have time for some people to maybe put some of their ideas in the chat?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, and even
So
as I'm talking, if you have ideas, something practical, I think the more ideas we have, the more it'll spark creativity. So go ahead and just write some ideas in there.
Yeah, so I encourage you all to, if there's something you specifically want to focus on, like I know I'm not very good at hooking people at the beginning. I just kind of go right to my like background slide. So I'll probably think about doing that in some future presentations, like Sarah mentioned.
Any ideas from anyone? Feel free to share them in there. If things come up later, we can always chat about them too. All right, Kurt says, I want to use icons to create reoccurring themes. And I took that idea from one of my colleagues in my lab here. Another thing I would highly recommend is if you see something that in a presentation, you're like, oh, I really like that, write it down and use it for a future talk, or try it out in a lab meeting. Yes, we can save questions for the end. After the oral presentations, we can take questions. Anna, do you want to do them now, or you can take them at the end? Is that okay?
Yeah, let's take them at the end, unless you like it impairs, you have a question right now that is kind of related to the reflection and activity. We'll take them at the end if that works for you, Leah.
Yeah. Save your questions, write them down, and then we'll touch on all of them at the end. All right, let's go ahead forward. We're going to go on to some additional tips. Okay, so some of this is going to be related to slides and some of it is not. Okay. The infamous, what do I wear to a conference? If it's your first time to a conference, I can relate. It's very hard to choose what to wear. But instead of thinking of the question, what do I wear? I want you to think of your future career in general. This isn't necessarily a place where you're looking for a date. So you are thinking about, you could potentially work with these people for the next 20 to 30 years. So I would always recommend business or business casual. And for this, first impressions are lasting impressions. ASB has created a poster on their website, so it's listed here, where there's things on conference attire and a lot of other topics that you can look up. But one thing that's important is that you feel comfortable and confident in the outfit that you're wearing. There's not a lot of distractions when you're presenting. Okay, another additional tip: smile. Okay, maybe try to look a little less awkward than this zebra, but go ahead and smile. It not only helps the audience to be more at ease, but it actually helps your intonation. It helps you to be more engaged with your presentation. And the more that you smile in practice, the more it will become a habit when you're actually presenting. And a huge thing is practice, practice, practice. Okay, practice by yourself. If it's a timed presentation, make sure that you're practicing it with a timer. Practice it with your teammates, with your lab. If you have regular lab meetings, that's a great place to try out ideas. Also, a good thing to do is sometimes at the beginning of a talk, you can be a little frazzled. You have to see the audience there and everything. So memorizing the first 3 sentences is a great idea. And then from there, things generally tend to flow. And also knowing all the transitions. Sometimes you have access to the presenter view, but sometimes you don't. So really knowing your slides by heart and knowing what is coming after another is really useful. Now, I've gotten a comment before where someone says, all right, I practiced it so much that it sounded very rehearsed. What do I do? Okay, so I think there's a balance between knowing things as a script and memorizing it all, and then also having a little bit of fluidity so it's not just a monologue. So this is where practicing with other people can really come in handy because they can give you tips on how to maybe relax a little bit. Now let's talk about what do you do with your final slide. This can be a confusing time because you don't really know how to land the plane. But one thing I would recommend is having acknowledgements. So who was funding the research, your contact information, a call to action, and maybe a thank you. And before this final slide, I would recommend having some takeaways. Okay, so that's when you're bringing all the magic that you did and you're bringing it back to a main point. Okay, I would recommend having 3 points max. 3 is generally a number that people can remember. 2 is even better if there are only 2 things. And so this next slide is an example of some research that I shared once. I was being corny and put a key on there as well. But the key takeaways were these 2 points, and I showed a picture of shoes that I had previously shown in the presentation to kind of bring the audience back to this image. And so from this oral presentation slide, 3 things that I want you to take away. Employ visuals more than plain text. The more you can use pictures of what you did in the research, or different things to draw people's attention, or different plots that you're explaining, the better. Keep it simple and strategic, and think of how you can serve the audience. And practice, 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 individually and with others. Okay, so with that, I will go to my final slide of thank you to Anna and Dr. Bishorner for this time. And I'm gonna pause right there. I'm going to present my final thank you slide as if I'm presenting at a conference, and you can see an example of how to kind of wrap up and neatly tie the bow. Okay, so I just finished my research. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, thank you so much for your time. I'd like to thank ASB for organizing the conference. I'd also like to thank the co-chairs and all of you for listening. And if you would like to learn more about this information, here's my contact information. You can email me or scan the QR code for my website. And I'd also like to thank Anna and Dr. Bishorner for their time and for organization. I'd love to take any questions that you have. Okay, so that's a short, succinct way to do it. Okay, so we're going to get to questions, but before we do that, let's talk about how do you answer questions, because this can also be a very nerve-wracking time. So I have 3 is the magic number today. So I have 3 different tips for this. Okay, 1, know the question. It's very hard to answer something that you don't know what they're asking. So if someone asks a question and you're not quite sure exactly what they're asking, you can always ask them to repeat or clarify, and you can make that part of your answer. Another thing, it's not common, but if someone asks you something in a degrading connotation, never repeat that, okay? You want to be calm and concise, right? So let's say that someone said, hey, this is definitely related to this. Like, why didn't you measure that? And you say, thank you for the question. So you're asking if this is related to this, and they say yes, and then you say, that's a very good point. We actually found that, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so know the question. Second, know the context. The person who is asking, sometimes it's directly what they're asking, but sometimes there's something behind the question, okay? So is the person who's asking, are they a fellow researcher who is really just wanting to know more about this topic? Are they a professor that maybe you could work with in the future? Is it someone from industry? Maybe you can get a job later. Know who you're talking to. What is their context? Why are they asking the question? And what might be their ultimate goal in asking you the question? Thirdly, hold back on your own curiosities and stick to what you know. It's, at least for me sometimes, it's very easy to dream and to see, well, maybe it could be this or this, but I would encourage you to have a waffle, not a spaghetti brain. Okay, so think in compartments, not just all over the place. Steer to what you know. And with that, it's okay to say that you don't know. And then you can speculate on what might be appropriate. For example, hey, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. We didn't necessarily look into that, but what we did look into was this, and we think that it might go this way. If you are speculating on what you're proposing, make sure that you say that you're speculating. All right, so those are 3 ways to answer questions. Know the question, know the context, and hold back on your own curiosities. So with that, we are going to break for questions. So this is where we can ask some questions. And also here is the QR code for the survey that we mentioned at the beginning. We would love to have your feedback. Again, not only is it helpful to improve future events, but we use the data to justify receiving funds for these events. All right.
And feel free to, so we'll take some time for questions right now. You can put them in the chat and I can monitor the chat and read them out loud to Sarah. You can raise your hand, you can unmute, whatever you are most comfortable with. Okay, we have a question right now, and then I also see that Leia's hand is raised. So Gerard is asking, do you recommend having the concluding statements in the thank you slide?
That's a great question. So thanks, Gerard. I would recommend having them as different slides. So let's say you do your methods, your results, and then your discussion or final remarks. And then you have one slide that's saying, hey, if you zoned out in all of the rest, come back and focus in on this one slide and you list your concluding statements. And then after that, you can have your thank you slide with the different acknowledgements and all of those things. I have seen it done where people have, let's say, a main point with the thank you so that while they're answering questions, they can go back to that slide. What you can always do is once people start asking questions, you can just go back a slide to your final slide so that it's still on the screen so people see the take-home points. Nice question.
All right, Leia, do you want to ask your question? And is it Leia or Leah?
It's Leah. Thank
Okay,
you.
sorry.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. My question was about explaining graphs. I was trying to like jot down as you were speaking really quickly about like how kind of the format and how you spoke about the graph. So what I got down is you spoke about axes and like the markers, or like if it was a scatter plot, or like what the bars would be if it was a bar plot. And then the trend of the line or what you saw, and then the importance of the conclusion. Would that be what you would recommend for explaining graphs?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great way to explain it. A kind of a step back from that is when you are looking at the plot, you want to make sure that you get kind of the structure of it all, and then you zoom in. Okay, so the structure is the axes. So yes, on the y-axis, we have this. On the x-axis, we have this. If there's multiple markers, like you were saying, you can say, and the markers represent this. If you have multiple plots in the same thing, you can say, on the left, we have this. On the right, we have this. And then you can go to trends. All right, so we fit this kind of logistic regression or whatever it was to this plot, and we saw that there was this kind of relationship to it. And then you can always just show the p-values on there. Sometimes you don't even need to, if it's on the screen, you don't need to necessarily say the p-value out loud. You can say, we saw that there was a relationship between these two variables. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
All right, more questions. Come on. I know they're there. All right.
Ivan, you want to go?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Is that okay? Awesome. Well, thank you, Sarah, by the way, for the presentation and everything. Got a lot of good stuff out of it. But I think one of my questions was just with animations and adding pictures and stuff. What do you feel like is kind of like that line between, keeping it professional, but also, keeping it interesting and fun?
I have definitely been on this line a lot. Dr. Basherna can tell you. So I think, yeah, it's a hard one. So you want to, the animations, you want to keep it what is necessary in order to show your research. Okay, so if you have a lot of information on one slide, then it can be all right, I'm going to bring things in as they come in. Think about, is it necessary for this animation for people to understand what I'm trying to say? So kind of a broader picture of what is happening. let's take the current slide that I have up right now. Is this picture necessary? No, it's not necessary at all. In this environment, I can put something like this. I'm not going to use this kind of picture for a conference presentation because it just doesn't work. I've been in student conferences where I can maybe be a little more flexible and try some ideas out. And then afterwards I say, yeah, that didn't work. It just, I've honestly, I've told some jokes before in them and then they just flop. And it's like, well, I tried it and got a few laughs and it's okay. So I think knowing your environment, what kind of conference is it? How likely is it that you have just students, if you have professors? And think about, is it necessary for this animation, for this particular thing, to show the research? Yeah. Kurt, Dr. Bashar, do you have any tips on that? I feel like you would have a good insight into that as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I keep thinking back to that slide where you talk about, you know, like the difference between I want to do a good job and I want to serve my audience. And I think a visual that enables your audience to engage with you is what's needed. And so I think, you know, I think a fun slide, especially, you know, later in the presentation when people's attention might be dwindling a little bit, is not a bad thing.
Yeah. Does that answer enough, Evan?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So kind of putting more animations towards maybe your information heavy, number heavy stuff. Maybe not putting it when you're just like visuals for methods, but not really anything too crazy.
Yeah. And this is where practicing with other people and getting their feedback can be really important. I gave a lot of, I think in our lab, we had them semesterly presentations. And I think every presentation I would just try something new, see if it worked. And it was a good way just to practice the presentations and see how to present the research in a way that really got across to people.
I'll add, we're blessed with a lab that is brutally honest to us, not in a mean way, but in a very honest way. And you want your friends to point out, you know, stuff that's not landing on a presentation. So if you're watching someone else's presentation and something's not working, you know, feel free to give them that feedback. There's a lot of people here, which is awesome. I'm so excited that we had 70+ people attend. But it's also a big crowd to start, like, you know, like unmuting and talking in front of. And so I wanted to maybe try something. And are we able to create breakout rooms?
Yes. Yeah. So we have 72 people. So what size are you thinking?
I was thinking maybe 12 breakout rooms, maybe about
Okay.
6 per room. So here's my suggestion when we go to breakout rooms is one of 3 things. One is share things that you learned here that you want to implement. That's option 1. Option 2 is what are challenges that you're having about your presentation, and try and get, you know, the group to sort of help you with it. And option 3 is just that prompt of, you know, what does it mean to go from, am I doing a good job, to how am I serving my audience, and what changes about your presentation serve that goal. So I'm going to suggest that we do 8 minutes in the breakout rooms, and then if a couple breakout rooms want to share out before we switch over to posters, I think that would be really fun.
Great. Yeah, I will set up those breakout rooms. Kurt, I'm gonna, the topics for discussion, can you send those to me and then I'll broadcast them to the breakout rooms, just because I know I can't even remember them all. So I'll send them out to everyone. So you will be put in a breakout room and then we will reconvene a little bit before 2. And just a reminder, at 2, we'll start talking about the posters. as was generally supported by the NSF. So I'll post that link again, and then I will hand it off to Sarah.
Yep, muted. All right, thank you all so much for your great interaction so far. This has been awesome. So now we're going to get into posters. Okay, so for some of you, maybe you're not presenting a poster, but some of the techniques here, they can be helpful for how to engage with the poster, and also how to create just different graphics in general. There will be some things that are repeated from the last, but it's just to drill in the points. All right, posters. What we're going to talk about now is engaging the audience, and then we'll talk about some formatting and practical info, and then some additional topics and some tips. So in general, we have the same theme of, for a poster presentation, how can I serve the audience? How can I give them something that maybe they don't have before? So that's our general overarching theme. But then we have some different things from presenting a poster, networking, discussing new ideas. You're meeting people face to face that maybe you've heard about before, but never met in person. All right. And I'm sure all of us, at some point, if you've ever gone to a poster session, you've seen people that maybe have this look. And so maybe we can't always avoid the awkward of you're looking at different posters and you just have no idea what's going on. But perhaps we can create an environment where it's less likely that people will just have their mouths open and wondering what's happening. So some ways that I would recommend is to know the audience. So for example, for ASB, you might have students and professors and researchers. So who is going to be looking at your poster, knowing this and knowing the context? So are you standing at your poster the whole time that you don't need to have as much information on your poster? Or is it going to be standing alone that people maybe need to read a little bit more? You have to have some more ideas. So for the oral presentations, we had the 7 seconds and 2-minute rule. Okay, so 7 seconds to draw them in, and then 2 minutes they were deciding if they were going to pay attention or not. For poster, it's even shorter. Okay, so as you're walking through a poster session, you generally have 3 seconds to capture someone's attention. Okay, so you have something that pops out and catches their eye. And then once they stop, you have about 30 seconds to secure their attention. Okay, so I'll go through some different ways that you can draw them in from that. But just a first recommendation is to look approachable when you're standing next to your poster. Okay, and that means don't be on your phone. It's an hour or two. Don't have your phone out, and just smile, engage. Don't look like this lovely little monkey. And also, one thing I like to think of is, perhaps you're in a department store sometime and you just want to look around and someone asks you, can I help you with anything? And you say, maybe, no, just I'm looking, thanks. Or maybe someone says, yes, can you take me through your research? And this is where it's really good to have a 2-minute version of your talk and a 5-minute version of your talk, plus or minus a few seconds, of course. And so you can say, would you like the 2-minute version or the 5-minute version? And they can say, you know what, give me the 2-minute, or give me the whole spiel, 5 minutes. Make sure if you say 5 minutes, you stick to 5 minutes. So this is another example where it's good to practice. You can also ask them, all right, just so I know what kind of audience I am talking to, what's your background? Are you a clinician? Are you a student? Do you know this research at all? And it helps you to tailor your message a little bit. And this is a beautiful thing that we can do in poster sessions, but not necessarily in presentations. All right, so I'm gonna be raw with you guys. I'm gonna show you the first poster that I made. I wouldn't say it's absolutely awful, but it definitely has some things that could be improved. And I would like you, from when you look at it, I'm gonna ask you to put in the chat to, don't tear me to shreds, but put some things in there of things that you notice that you think could be better. Okay, so I'm gonna go through some different things of how it could be better. And I would love to see if you guys can catch them too. Okay, so just write something little here, there, something that you see that could be improved. Okay, so I'll wait for small figures. Yep. Yep, keep it coming. Too many words. Great. Hard to follow the order. Oh, you guys are great. No clear lines. It's not organized. It's cluttered. Anything else? I have a lot of things, so you guys keep it coming. Font size, great. Anything else? Anything else? Results come early in the poster. Figures us into each other. Great. Nice job, guys. Bleed into each other. Yep, got that. All right, so let's go through some different things. First, let's talk about the font. One, yes, it's way too small, and especially for a PowerPoint presentation. And I'm using sans serif font because apparently I just took it from my document and put it straight over to a poster. Okay, sans serif is better. Sorry, I was using a serif font. Sans serif is better. There's just less squigglies and it's just easier to read. There's just way too much text all over. Okay. In general, you don't have to put sentences. Okay, make them bullet points of, it doesn't have to say in this case, in the workplace, fall slips and trips accounted for 25%. You can say fall slips and trips, 27% all injuries. Make it short and keep it very concise. People can fill in the rest of the words. Okay. With the color scheme and the total design, as some of you mentioned, there's no strategic way that my eyes are following the poster. So you can be strategic with, let's say, a white background, and you only put the colors where you want their eyes to go right away. Okay, so there's no main draw for the eyes here. Everything is kind of like, I don't know where to look. And there's little variation in the text size itself. So if I want you to look at just the purpose, then I'm going to make the purpose really large text size, but there's none of that here. Also, the conclusion, I think I just took it straight out of the abstract because it's just a block of text, okay? So it would be much better as bullets and not as a paragraph. Also, one thing I'll talk about later is I could have included contact information or QR code to be able to give something for the audience to look at afterwards, okay? See, anything else? No take-home message, conclusion, being concise. Great job, you guys did great. Okay, there are a lot of different ways you can make a poster. Okay, so some of you may have seen the hyper minimalist version where there's just one or two sentences in really large font with QR code and then a few other ones. I'd say that works, but generally I would go for a more traditional approach. So I'm going to go through some different ways that you can do it. There's no one size fits all, okay? But first, let's go over formatting, okay? Before you even start with opening up a PowerPoint file or anything, I would suggest taking a good old school piece of paper, take a pencil, and draft out what you want it to look like, all right? You say, all right, my title is going to be here, and then my authors, then I have the background, the question, etc. And this saves you a lot of time so that you're not stuck in all of the details of formatting. I can tell you with the poster I just saw you, I spent way too much time trying to make sure all the lines were perfect and creating my template instead of focusing on the content itself. So draft out what you want. Unless there's a template from the conference, you can choose either landscape or portrait. I think there are advantages to both. Generally, I'll go with the landscape, so horizontal version now. You can do 2 to 3 columns. Font sizes, I would recommend 40 or larger. But really it's, all right, when I'm looking at it and imagining the size, is it large enough that I could read it from a few meters away or for a few feet away? So really making sure that it's readable. Similar to your presentation, use contrasting colors. So dark on light, light on dark, and use pictures more than words. This is your methods. Use a picture of, if you're using motion capture, you can put a picture of where all of the different reflective markers went. If you're using a very particular setup, it's helpful so you don't have to just use your hands to try to explain it all, okay? And then this is an example of if you have a landscape poster, you can put your title and your authors at the top, and then you want your best method section to be in the top middle, and then your best results or your figure in the top right. These are the areas where their eyes are naturally going to be drawn there, and you want to put your best foot forward or your best material there. The things on the bottom are for your references, for your acknowledgements, for the things that are important, but important enough to make it to the poster, but not important enough to be the main idea. All right. So I'm going to show again this chart suggestion. Again, we'll put it in the supplementary resources that come later. But just to show, there are a lot of different ways you can represent your data. And there's no one correct way. Again, this goes back to try this out with some different people and see which way they can see the data and understand it the easiest. In your plots, use a large enough font and explain what the axes are. And make sure you label your axes. Okay, so if there's any room that maybe someone doesn't understand it, put just the label. And then just like we said in the presentation, make sure you orient the person to your graph when you're explaining it. So on the y-axis, we have this. On the x-axis, we have this. The markers are this. This is the general trend we see. And we saw that there was a significant relationship between these things. All right. Let's go on to some other practical information for slides. All right. You probably can't change your title now, but if in the future you are thinking about submitting for a poster presentation, try to keep it short and snappy. And maybe you can still change it, but maybe check on that. But you want a title that's short, snappy, still efficient, still professional, but that it's on target. And in general, I would say try to make the title so that it fits in one line across the top of your poster. When people see a title that's 2 or 3 lines long, they're not going to look at those, the whole thing. And remember, you have 3 seconds to draw in their attention right away. Make sure you have the author's first and last names with degrees is great, because if you just have a letter and then the name, sometimes there isn't a great connection and they don't know who it is. And once you see a name several times, you can kind of see who it is. No jargon. Okay, so use easy to understand language. If you use acronyms, make sure you're explaining them on the poster. And then make sure, I think it's great to have acknowledgements. I think it's great to give credit where it's due. Okay, not taking a whole large section, but making sure that you give credit to funding, to people who aren't authors that really contributed a lot to it. And then going back to images, make sure you have high enough resolution images, because on your screen, it may look good enough, but zoom into your PowerPoint and see, all right, is this picture really pixelated? Maybe I need to find a higher resolution picture. All right, so here's an example of something that's good. So you have a portrait poster format. It's okay, the version on the left, you have the background, you have the results, the methods, and the conclusion. But let's say if you kind of mix some of these things together, you have a takeaway, you have the methods, you have the main result labeled, and then you have the background and the question there. And again, there are so many ways that you can do this. Next, I'm going to show you I'm not saying it's perfect, but a better poster than when I first started. And I'm going to go through some of the reasons why it's maybe a little bit better. Okay. The font still could be larger, I do admit, but we have the title on one line with all the different authors. We have the logos there. The introduction is in bullet points with just shorter text. And then I have an image of what is happening on a foot. I have the methods of how we would use this particular footwear. The aim is there. And then I have all of my results in the middle. And then we have just a few bullet points for the take home points, and then acknowledgements and references. And then I have my contact information and a QR code at the bottom. I probably could still take out some information of this and just explain it verbally with people, but just to show an example of what it could look like. And if you're looking for more tips, again, on the ASB student website, there is this poster presentation tips where there's several different posters like this, and you can see some different things. So we're going to go back to what to wear. I talked about this briefly in the presentation part, but business or business casual is great. The goals of your poster presentation and what you're going to wear is you want to think about, how do I set myself up for my future career? How do I not distract from the research, which is actually what I want to present? But I also want to feel comfortable and confident, because I'm going to be standing there for a long time, sometimes an hour or two. So make sure you're wearing good shoes, make sure you're in an outfit that's comfortable. Okay, let's go on to just a few additional tips. Again, practice with your peers, your mentors beforehand. Really try not to read the poster. If someone wanted to just read it, they could look and read it themselves, and they don't need you there. Try to summarize the main points and leave room for questions. So engaging with people. You can put a QR code to either the abstract or the PDF, or you can also put your contact information. So I have a website that I've been using just to get some research out there. And so I put that QR code in addition to some information about the abstract. Business cards are not dead. I still see a lot of business cards being handed out. So if you have a business card, it can always really help in these kind of things. And finally, smile. Again, even as you're in this talk right now, why don't you practice just having a pleasant resting face and as if someone wants to engage with you, okay? So it's something we can always be practicing. All right, we are coming to the end of the poster session. I know that was really rapid, and we will send out a supplementary resources page for everyone who's here with just some of the main points and some other resources you can take. But in general, if you have to think of one large or a few points for your poster, make sure it's readable. Can someone look at it and skim it and see all of the main things? Prioritize your images and your graphs and avoid large blocks of text. Bullets are better than blocks of text. Practice and get feedback. As many first looks as possible, as many people who look at it for 3 to 30 seconds and say, all right, I think you can move this, and get that. And also look engaging, look approachable, and look confident like this little puppy. It's your research. You know exactly what you did. Maybe you're not the expert in the field, but you know what you did. And people are coming to you because they're interested in learning what you did. So be confident about that. Show them what you did. Be open to questions. You know your research probably better than they do. So in general, sometimes we can get so stuck on tiny little detail, but when we zoom out, we can see this larger picture. And so for the poster, instead of looking at, I hope I do a good job, we can go back to this theme of how do I best serve the audience? Even with all of the details of my research, how do I take a large step out and say, all right, with the research that I have, what is the best way that I can serve the audience with information or new ideas or something else that they want to come? Again, it helps relieve the nerves and it helps you to have a generosity mindset, which naturally helps you to be more relaxed and do a better job anyway. Okay, so with that, I would like to again thank Anna and Dr. Bashorner for organizing this event. Thank you all so much for staying on for all of this information. As we said at the beginning, we would love for you to fill out the survey. We're going to take questions still, but if you can fill out the survey, it helps us to improve future events, and it helps to provide data to support future events like this. So now we'll take some questions, and if you guys see me in conferences or anything like that, I would love to meet you. If you have questions specific to posters or anything like that, you can feel free to email me, and I'll be of help if I can. And if you're presenting at ASB, best of luck. You're going to do great. Remember, this is your research and people are coming because they want to know more about it. Great. Thank you so much. All right, we'll take some questions now. You can go ahead and put them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, we can take questions that way. So we have a question here regarding titles. Are abstract titles already set? Do individuals have separate titles for their posters and abstracts? That's a great question that I actually don't know. Kurt, Anna, do you guys have ideas on that?
No, so Delaney, you are right. So you want your poster title to match your abstract title so that people can find you. So the tips that Sarah gave on short title would be for like future presentations. Good question. And Sarah, I have a question too. I feel like you mentioned getting a lot of first looks on posters. How do you balance? So I feel like people, especially for posters, have a lot of personal opinions and personal preference. So how do you know when something's someone's personal preference or it truly is like a better way to format a poster?
Yeah. get a lot of first looks, but prioritize who your first looks are from at the beginning. If it's really your baby that you're working with, don't get someone that you know is just going to tear it to shreds. If you have a supervisor, they're often a really good person to get feedback from, also from lab mates. But it's yeah, that's a difficult question, Anna, because I think some things like let's say color choice, that's often if it's not part of a template, it can just be personal choice. So I think it's, if you have more than one person that's telling you the same thing, it probably is that it could be improved. If it's, you can ask them, why do you propose this change? If it's because, oh yeah, I just like this color. Or if it's to say, well, I think that my eyes are drawn here, and yeah. So there's always a why behind the question. So you can ask them, all right, why do you think that? And kind of see where they're going at it from. And you guys are all smart, so you'll figure out, all right, what is the kind of feedback that I want to take, that I'm not, and we can always be teachable in that. And find some examples of, I didn't necessarily say this, but you can find some examples online of posters that you're drawn to, and then see what aspects of those posters you really liked, and try to incorporate that into your poster as well. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you do? Let's say you're explaining your poster to one person, and then you see another person who's looking at the poster. And if you want me to make it more complicated, let's say the first person is like really engaged, lots and lots of questions, and the other person that kind of starts looking at it is like the person that you came to this conference to talk to.
Yeah. This is an example of doing your best to have social prowess. So I think, okay, so let's say someone is coming and you're giving them your spiel, and you're talking to them a while, and you've already made a really good connection with them, such that it wouldn't be a problem at all that you could arrange a time that you could talk later, and you have already established a good connection. If they're taking, let's say, 10 minutes, I would, and it's only an hour or maybe hour and a half poster session, I think that would be a good point where you say, hey, like, thank you so much for all of your questions. Here's my email address. I would love to connect with you, just so I can talk to a few other people. Would you mind if we met at a different time, or if we followed up on this conversation at a different time? That's what I would suggest. And if, let's say, you're just starting with someone and then someone else hops in, this is where you use your judgment of, all right, if I'm just at the beginning of the method section, let me just quickly go over the intro again. I'm not going to lose the other person. Let me see. And then you jump into the methods and results. So this is where you have to kind of see, all right, how much can it's a good exercise in how much can I summarize my research in different terms, just to make sure that the people who are interested in the research can actually see it. Yeah. Any other recommendations with that, Kurt? Dr. Bishorter?
No, I like that. I'm terrible at kind of doing that because I feel guilty. And so I think sort of the opening it up to a future conversation, I really like that suggestion.
Yeah. And for anyone who's on here, I would highly recommend, if you don't already, get a LinkedIn account. Okay. So the previous conferences I've been at, I almost always connect with people, get their name on LinkedIn, and then we connect that way. And then that starts a conversation that after that I can share email or other things. But LinkedIn is a really useful tool for connecting with people, or just take a picture of their badge if they have one, if they don't have a business card or something.
Sarah, we do have another question in the chat. Shreya's wondering about, like, during that 5-minute spiel, can you encourage your listeners to ask clarifying questions during that?
Yeah, I would say clarifying questions are fine, as long as it's not like, let's say, for example, you're explaining a certain method and they ask, sorry, can you go over that again? Did you mean this? And then you find a way to briefly explain it again. I think those kind of questions are fine. If it's a question that is going to lead to a longer response that maybe isn't the meat of your talking, say, oh, that's a great question. Can you remind me at the end to come back to that question, and I can answer that more in depth? And then that it shows that you want to answer it. But if there are other people listening there too, you can get through all of the main stuff in your 5-minute talk, and then get to those questions afterwards. Good question. Anything else? And guys, posters are hard. They're hard sometimes. It requires a lot of social energy all at once. I've had my fair share of awkwardness, and I think we just have to encourage ourselves that it really is, it's a great opportunity. We meet people. I've met people during poster sessions that I would have never met otherwise, and it's a great opportunity, and it's pushing yourself, it's networking, and you're gonna grow either way. So go for it.
Well, with that, thank you so much, Sarah, for that encouragement. Let's all be a little like Sarah and be a little more bold and try out new things for our presentations. Thank you all so much for attending and participating. Look for an email with that supplementary material that Sarah has put together so you can use as you put together your presentations. And Sarah, I don't know if you want to provide your email again, just in case anyone wants to reach out to you. And I look forward to meeting many of you or seeing many of you. And if you have any questions while you're working on things, please feel free to reach out. Thank you, everyone, so much. And please don't forget to fill out the survey. Thank you to those that already have.